Welcome to part 6, where we will be creating the auth block now that we have our repositories and use cases and all that good stuff for login specifically. Now we're going to create this block in a quicker way using an extension called Bloc by Felix Angelov. And this allows us to essentially within our presentation folder, actually I'm going to delete this block folder right now. We don't need it. It will make it for us. And we'll just go new block and give it a name, auth. You'll see this will actually go and create some files for us with some very good boilerplate content to get things underway. So let's open up the auth state, and it already kind of has our initial one. Now I'm going to add the word state here, as I kind of mentioned earlier. I just like having the word state or event or whatever it kind of is, use case, just to make it really clear when we're importing things and we're not getting confused. So we'll have that one, and we're going to have a loading state as well. And we're going to need a success state. Now the success state isn't just an empty state. It's going to have a user within it, which we will construct right here. Now, I do like having const here, so the way to fix this is I actually just need to make a constructor within our sort of base class, and that will allow this to work as long as it's a const constructor. So we'll do that. I don't necessarily know if there's any like optimization or this makes it any better. I just love whenever I can use a const to use a const, and it's never let me down. Okay, we're going to just make the failure one, which is similar to success, except it's not going to have a user. It's going to have a message. Next, let's get the event set up here. So for now, although we'll have more events, all we really have to worry about is a login event. And we'll eventually add the ones for register and so on in a future video. Now, the auth login event will require some parameters to be passed in, specifically an email and a password. So we'll get that going and get a little constructor in here requiring these two fields. Next, we'll get our auth block set up here. So it already kind of gave us the nice starter generics for us. Everything's good there. We will have to update the auth state initial just because we renamed that earlier, as you can see there. And we can do our just when a generic auth event happens, we definitely want to kind of emit a loading function, if I can type this right. So then anytime there's any event that's auth related, we will start by loading and it'll get replaced by something else after, just like we're doing in the movie block. And then let's do one for auth login now. So we have our auth login event, and we're going to pass these things on, but we're just going to create a little private function here that will do this. And we can create the method. That's a command period to get that little context menu up. And now we have this ready to go, at least, with sort of the boilerplate. So we'll make this async, and we're going to want to now work with our code that we've written in the previous video to actually get this going. So we'll need to get our use case in here. So we'll get our user login use case, and we'll make this part of the constructor. And so let's add our constructor here. And it seems I've made a bit of an issue, a bit of a mistake here. We already have a constructor, so let's get rid of this guy, and we're actually going to put this stuff right in here. Just copy that out and put it, and remove this line, and everything's good. So now we have our use case, the user login use case, and all we're going to do is call it. We can, of course, call, but call is kind of a magic function, and just simply having it like this will allow us to do it with a little bit less code. So we need our user login params to be passed in, and we can get our email from that auth login event, as well as the password, because they both have those in it as the way we've designed it. So now we'll take this result and we'll fold on it because we are getting back an either. So in the case that we have a failure, we'll just do what we normally do, which is emitting a auth state failure event. And we can get the message right from our failure object, failure.message, as you can see here. Now for success, we can essentially call this user because that's what it would be if it is a success. And now we can emit our auth state success. with that user being passed through. See, when you name things nicely, kind of just auto-completes for you, and super nice. Okay, let's get our page set up now. So inside here, we're going to make our login page. Now I'm going to fly through this because most of this is essentially just typical Flutter. This until we get to the getting the UI built out and get it all in place. There's not much going on that's specific to clean architecture or to Serverpod or any of these things. So we're going to make this a stateful widget, and I do like using stateful widgets when not to manage state. But to do things like get access to our, init state as well as our dispose, and it allows us also in some cases to actually call, an event when this page gets mounted into the app. So that's why we're using a stateful. Again, not using it to actually manage state. All of our state is of course being managed within Bloc. So we're going to create our text editing controllers here. We'll need an email controller to manage, obviously, our email address that's going to be typed in by our users, as well as a password controller. And we're going to have a form key because we're going to want to do some validation. And this is just a great way to deal with validation. If you've built a form in Flutter before, you'll be very familiar with form keys. And then, again, because we have access to the dispose method, we can actually dispose these when this page disappears. Okay, so in here, we're going to create a scaffold because this is a page. It's not just a component. So we'll have a scaffold right at the very top of the build. And within here, we're going to go through and actually build some stuff. So I'm just actually wrapping this now in a Bloc consumer because everything within this, we want to be able to access things within our state and listen for events and all that kind of stuff. So we're using consumer because it has both the listener and the builder. All right. So within our builder here, we are going to return a form as sort of the top level element. And we can do some sort of checks here, right? Like we did before. If it's loading, we're just going to have a loader, which is that shared component that we've made right here. And right here, if we have another state, like the auth state is success, I just want to return like a sized box because we're essentially going to be pushing away from the screen, and I don't want like the form just to pop back in after that loader and then just be gone a millisecond later. So that's just what we're doing here, and we're using sizebox.shrink just so it takes up no room. Okay, let's add our form key there, and we're going to have a child of a column to start with, and we're going to give it a main axis alignment of center. So everything is nice in the center. And there we go. Let's have some children here. Now, this is going to complain for a bit about, const sort of things because we don't have, or it's VS Code is telling us, hey, this could be a constant, but we are going to get to a point where we'll have some dynamic code in here and that will go away. So I'm not going to fix that, only to unfix it. So ignore for now. So we'll just have a nice little login text at the top. We'll have a size box to spread things out. We're going to have a text form field pointing to the email controller and just with some nice hint text of email. Nothing too crazy going on here. Password's the same, just we're going to obscure the text because, we don't want to see the password as you're typing it out. A little bit more space. And now let's have a button. And here it'll just be a text saying the word login. And now, but we have an on pressed event, this is now dynamic. And, we got rid of that lovely warning about, hey, this could all be a const. Okay, I've just pasted this from my Magic clipboard. It's just a gesture detector. We're going to do something in this on tap event. I'm using rich text just so that we can kind of make this a little bit pretty where the color kind of changes and it gets bold for the sign up button, but the whole thing will be clickable. So we'll just make this, pink so it kind of stands out. Okay, so that's kind of our UI here for our form. Now, in order to see this, we need to go to our router and actually register this route. So we will make this the login page .route, and of course, point it to the login page. Now we're going to want our initial location also to be the login page .route. So let's just put that there, and let's just refresh everything. And it seems like I have some weird issue here. I see the word Dart HTML. That's interesting. Let's see what's going on there. yeah, I guess somehow something got imported. So let's just search for Dart HTML in the project and find it. I don't know how they got imported. It might have been during the creating of the sort of like auto block or something happened. But we're good. Let's also import this right here. And we are using, because we generated this, we're using these like part things. So all these 3 files are actually part of the same file in some sense, even though they're separate files on your operating system. So it allows us actually just to do all the imports in one spot. It's a nice way to do stuff and keep these files really clean and simple. Okay, let's refresh. And okay, we have another error. Yep, of course, we forgot to do one thing. We need to go to our main.dart. And we need to actually register our auth block here. And we also need to, in our service locator, actually register the auth block as well. So this will just be a singleton. Of course, we don't want to use a factory here because we want only one instance of our auth block. So we'll pass in here. Now we need to also register our use case for this, which we have already, the user login use case. So let's just put that there and make this a little bit prettier. Make it even prettier. Yay. Okay, refresh. We should be good to go now. There we have it. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of padding around this block consumer because it just looks nicer when it's not edge to edge. Very good. Okay, so we have a login button, but it doesn't do anything yet. So, oh, yes, I have this. I need to change this to do. It's actually, that button is going to go to the register page, not the login page. So when we click login, we want to access our context.read.auth block and send an event through. And that is going to be the auth login event. And we can get our email from the email controller.text. We're going to trim it though, because emails shouldn't have, empty spaces at the start or end. Password controller.text, we don't want to trim. In theory, someone could have a space in their password at the end of the password or the start. And to me, that's still a valid password. So we're not going to trim that. Then we also want to kind of validate this ahead of time. So we're just going to do a if form key.currentState validate, then we'll call this. In the case that it doesn't, we'll get those little lovely messages. Now, we're not actually validating anything right now, so let's add something really quick in here. And we'll just get the value, and we're going to check. If the value is null or the value is empty, we're going to return sort of like a message, email required. Otherwise, we'll return null. Now, we could, of course, also validate, hey, is it a valid email, like with an @ sign and follows that. But I'm not going to worry about that now. Easy enough to do in the future. We'll do the same for password required. Just make sure that it's there. So just if I test it now, you actually see like, woo, it's showing errors when stuff is not there and doesn't actually move forward. But if we actually try and log in, and I have to remember what my email is, it was a while ago since we made it. So I'm opening up Data Grip right now and just going to Movie App, and let's go to our tables. It looks like not all the tables are there. We generated some new stuff, so let's just refresh. Maybe, yeah, there we go. Data Grip just had something cached. So let's look at the users, and okay, it's actually test@tylersavory.com. 123 was in my username. Okay, so now I know how to log in, and we can actually do this right now. So let's change this to test and put in my password. Hopefully I remember that. And there we have it. So we're logged in and everything's good. In fact, the Serverpod stuff says it's good. User signed in. Now we are seeing a blank, and that's because, in our builder, we're seeing if you have success, we're actually just going to go to blank. I'm going to do just a quick little debug thing here just so that make this easier to test. We can actually put some initial text here of my email address. I'm not going to do my password because it's a very embarrassing password. And that way, when we load this up, it'll just be easier to log in and log out. So right now, because we are just sending a sizebox shrink back, it's working exactly as expected. But we're going to look into our listener now to actually see, hey, when this certain event comes in, we want to redirect someone. So first of all, let's do, if there's a failure, we're going to essentially create a toast message. Now, we sort of already have something that does this, and I don't want to duplicate this. So we're actually going to create a new file here in core. I'm going to make a new folder called utils, and then a new file. And let's call this show snackbar.dart. And we're going to just make a function called show snackbar. And take that code that we just had and basically allow context to be passed in, because we need that, as well as the message itself, which will be a string. Now we have this nice reusable thing that we can use, and if we wanted to change the style of it or anything, now we only have to change it in one spot, just following a dry pattern. So we'll import that in, and we'll take this message that we had here and delete all this. Yay. Now we can take this lovely code and actually put it here by importing it, and same sort of thing, state.message. Now that will handle, if there was a failure. So let's check if state is auth state.success. Here's where we can do our redirect. So we can do context.go and our movie list page.route. And now we'll actually get it redirecting when we, have that success. So let's refresh and let's try logging in. And I did it with an incorrect password on purpose. I got some weird message back. I'll have to look into that, of why the message just says 0, but here, it seems to have worked. And if we refresh, we are brought back here, and that's because we're not actually handling anything right now about keeping the user logged in. Now, technically, Serverpod is keeping the user logged in, but Bloc has no, there's no event that we're firing when we load the app to be like, hey, check if I'm logged in, and if so, redirect me. So let's actually create a new event right now that can kind of be used for that use case. So we'll have auth is user logged in, I'm going to call it, with, of course, event at the end, and it's going to extend auth event. And we're not going to pass any parameters. It's just basically a simple check. Okay, so let's also check that one, auth user logged in, and then we'll make a cool function for this. And we'll just do command dot to get this lovely context menu and get our thing over here, make it asynchronous because it will be asynchronous. And now we can actually work with this. So let's go to our domain repository, and we're actually going to create a new repository function here that's going to return either a failure, as usual, or a void, because we're just checking. Actually, sorry. In this case, it's going to be a user we want to get back. So we want to get back the current user. Void will be used for something else. You'll see at some point. So now let's go to our implementation. And we will create that missing override. And here we're going to want to do something, obviously. So we'll get access to our data source, and we're going to call the current user function, which doesn't exist. So let's go make that next. All right, inside our auth data source, let's create a way to get our current user. So we'll first create the interface for it. It's going to return a user model. Technically, it could be null, so we'll do that. Then we'll create that override. I'm going to put this at the top. Personal preference. And we'll get access to our user by accessing our session manager, which is part of Serverpod, and we actually get back a signed in user. And here we can check if the user does not equal null. We'll return the user by just taking that user info and passing it through to our user model. Just like that. And we're also just going to check, if the ID isn't null and the email isn't null, because otherwise putting those sort of like forced null exclamation marks could create a problem. Otherwise, we'll just return null from here. Okay, so back in our auth repository implementation, here we basically call that, and we're going to check if the user is null. Let's actually return our left here of a failure, and we can just basically say user, user's not logged in or something like that. And I am seeing this sort of error here because we need to mark this as async so that we're actually returning a future. And we can make that a const. Otherwise, let's return right with that user right inside of it. Boom. So we have our implementation. Now, something we can do, we can actually make this entire thing not async, because the session manager doesn't actually need this to be async. So we'll do that. It's something that's just like in memory. It doesn't actually have to make like a call anywhere. Okay, so let's try this out, and we'll just refresh, and we'll see we stay logged in, which is super nice. And it's bringing us to the right page. Now in the next video, we are going to set up a user qubit so that we can have access to our current logged in user anywhere within our app.